This is Chapter 14, Discussion Number 3, The Ins and Outs of World War I. Another big part to understanding World War I is to understand the totality of how much a nation needed to be involved in the war effort in order to bring victory. All the nations instituted universal conscription, a draft for all men of military age so that all of them would be available to fight in the war. It wasn't just volunteers, it just wasn't whoever they picked. Every single nation involved had universal conscription in order to force men into the military. Also, economic warfare with the naval vessels, including submarines, which were used to interdict any shipping that were coming into a country in order to sink them so that the trade could not happen and supply the enemy. This was an idea of total war. Entire economies were changed over in order to produce the weapons of the World War. And so this total war concept took over the countries as the militarism said that we must not lose because our nation is great and wonderful. As all the men would leave to fight, women would then take the manufacturing jobs. And it turned out that women could do a lot of the manufacturing jobs that men could do. And so the argument that women were going to be unable to be full participants in an economy and in a country kind of were proven wrong by the women in manufacturing, which also gives them the argument that they ought to be able to be given equal voting rights. And we're going to see after World War I that a lot of these nations, the United States and Great Britain especially, are going to give women the right to vote coming out of World War II. Nations engaged in propaganda. Germany, Austria-Hungary, also France and Great Britain made great amount of effort to try to encourage people, saying that this was a war that needed to be fought, that needed to be won for the good of the country, to encourage enlistment. And also they spent a lot of their time doing the propaganda toward the United States and toward other countries to help join them in the process so that they could get that overwhelming majority in those alliances to overwhelm the other side. And so Germany, Great Britain, France, Russia, Austria-Hungary went to great lengths either to get sympathies, to join in, or at least maybe to keep countries out. Now, when we get toward the end of World War I, countries start running out of gas, essentially, to continue the war. And the first one that pretty much gives up is Russia. Citizens were completely upset with the current government. The current government is overthrown by the Soviet communists. The communists immediately sue for peace against Germany. The Treaty of Brest-Litovsk is signed, and Germany and Russia no longer are fighting. With Russia out of the war, Germany and Austria-Hungary are able to send all of their troops against France. And a lot of people, France and Great Britain, are worried as soon as Russia says we quit, that they may not be able to stop the Germans on their own. However, it turns out that they're going to get some help. Now, the United States had spent a large amount of effort trying to stay out of this world war. They didn't want to have anything to do with it. Primarily, first of all, remember that America is populated primarily by immigrants. Immigrants from both sides of this war. So why would they want to get involved and tick off half the population on the one side or the other? However, Germany doesn't make a lot of friends. Germany, by the same using the U-boats and not being fair about how it's sinking these ships, and Americans are being killed, especially the HMS Lusitania, which is sunk by Germans, which is pretty much turns out to be the last straw that the Americans are saying we no longer are sympathetic to the Germans, we're going to come in on the other side. Another idea that came through is that what's known as the Zimmerman telegram, a letter from the Germans to Mexico offering that if Mexico were to keep the United States busy so that the United States could not come over to Europe, that Germany would so much appreciate it that they would then come over and help Mexico after they finish off Europe, and they would give Mexico, Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona back to the Mexicans in return for helping the Germans. So the Germans setting up the United States by using Mexico, the sinking of the U-boats, other German atrocities, get the Americans to start feeling sympathetic toward the Allies against the Central Powers. When the United States finally declares war against Germany and Austria-Hungary, 2 million troops, American financing, and American manufacturing is being promised to the Allies. And with that supplying an Allied offensive convinced Germany it could not win. Not necessarily that Germany would lose, but that Germany could not win, and Germany was worried. This concludes discussion number 3, the ins and outs of World War I.